Good evening. Welcome on in to another episode of From Day One, the overnight edition with Art Bell. Tonight, we dig really deep into his archives, the very first Dark Matter show, again, the precursor to Midnight in the Desert, that ever aired on Sirius XM. And I love this one for two reasons. One, the guest, Dr. Michio, is with him tonight. And also, two, it shows that even the greats like Art Bell can worry. So without further ado, are you ready to take that ride from the great American Southwest? Here we go, with Art Bell's very first Dark Matter on Sirius XM.
Want to take a ride? From the high desert and the great American Southwest, exclusively on Sirius XM Radio, this is Dark Matter with your host, Art Bell. Now, here's Art.
Well, thank God. I'm finally on. Hi, everybody. This is Dark Matter. It's a brand new program. There will be listeners from Sirius XM, new ones, and they're probably going, what's this all about? And then there's going to be my group that's probably come over from terrestrial radio. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to extra terrestrial radio. This is going to be fun. It's strange because before the show began, and for days, or maybe weeks now, I've been sweating it, really sweating it. But just before the program tonight, half hour, an hour before, I began, pacing back and forth, sweat breaking out on my forehead, sweat breaking out all over me. But just before it began, I just played some music that I love. I'm a music nut, as most of you know. And a strange kind of calm descended on me. And so now I'm calm. Now I've got something I've got to do. Tonight we're going to have Michio Kaku, Professor Kaku, on. He is probably America's premier theoretical physicist. And it's really, really, really interesting stuff. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Michio on TV, various science shows. In fact, actually, he's all over TV. I'm going to talk to him about that. But there's something I've got to do at the beginning of the show. And I promised my listeners I would do this. So some of you here on Sirius XM may not digest this very well, but it won't be long, and then we'll begin the regular show. Yeah, here I am back. And, of course, the question is, everybody who's wanted to interview me is, why are you back? Why? And so I'm here tonight to answer that. But to answer it, I need to relate a little bit of history. Something I've never talked about, something I've wanted to talk about for years now. So a little history. I've been called a serial retiree. Is a, fair rap. There were short periods where I left broadcasting because of the events that occurred to my family and in my life. My son was attacked. There were false allegations that were made about me, and I had to take legal action over it. My wife of 16 years, dear Ramona, died unexpectedly. Sorts of things that come along in life, they're big things too, would stop most people, I think, in their tracks, and they stopped me. In each case, though, I did return to broadcasting as soon as I could. In some cases, like my son and so forth and so on, it was a matter of days before I got back. It was one long period of time when I was gone, and this is the one that I have never talked about. I'm going to tonight. That was 9 months to a year, somewhere in there, that I was gone. And that fairly is a retirement. The reason for it is the reason for my falling out with Premier Radio and Clear Channel. For years now, I've had something inside of me that to move forward, I'm going to have to get out. So here it comes. I've got a lot of anger, institutional hatred, actually, for Premier Radio, that if anything has grown in recent weeks and days. tonight I guess I want to tell you why and clear the air, and then I'll be done with it. Back in 98, my son was sexually assaulted by his high school teacher, who was HIV positive. That man is now serving a prison sentence for that attack, and my son to this day suffers deep scars which have never healed and never may. Thank God, of course, he's not HIV positive or has AIDS or anything like that. Anyway, while trying to deal with all of that, a couple of radio hosts went on international radio and said there was a secret sealed indictment here in Pahrump, Nevada, charging me, Arbel, with child molestation. My God. A more horrible thing I can't imagine. It's right on up there with murder, maybe worse, right? I think murderers are treated better in prison, so it's really an awful allegation. Then others began repeating it, and worse. To be very, very clear, and I want to be, there was an indictment, not naming me, no. But of course, the teacher who had attacked my son. Well, I immediately contacted Premier Radio and requested their legal help in defending my reputation as well as that of the companies, right? It's their reputation that's on the line, too. Wouldn't you think? Anyway, at the time, my show was clearing, I think, more affiliates than Rush Limbaugh's. Not more, I'm sorry. More than anybody save Rush Limbaugh. So I assumed that the company would leap to our collective defense. I mean, that's a horrible allegation, right? Boy, was I wrong. I had gone to the top management for help. I received a memo shortly thereafter, which I'm sure they didn't intend for me to get, but I got it, and I've still got it. It was from a manager at Premier to another manager, actually vice president, that said in part, get this, it was a worthless lawsuit, and besides, Premier had not been defamed. I went nuts. To me, then and now, it's totally beyond incredible that any company could not act to protect one of their big assets, their host, and their own reputation. How could it be? How could it be? I just seethed about it inside for years and until now, that they could let me, sort of slowly twist in the wind like that. Some of it's really hard to put into words. It affected me so heavily. Of course, I pursued the legal case myself, my own cost. And then, in 2000, not quite yet through the legal case, I said to them, bye. I'm just not dealing with this bye. And that's why I left. Well, finally, after a long absence, the show, I guess, was in some distress. It had lost affiliates. And so the president of Premier Radio at that time, as well as the CEO of Clear Channel, the big guy himself, both came a-calling. They sat on my couch. And they said, we want you back. Name your price. Now, bear in mind, these are two guys who could have, stepped in and said, forget this memo, forget this lawyer. We're going to back this guy up and ourselves at the same time. They could have, but they didn't. So I think I may have initially suggested that they do some sort of procreation calisthenics with each other or something. I said, look, if name your price. I said, you don't have enough money. I said things that can't be repeated here. And, actually on Sirius XM they could, but we're not doing that on this show, by the way. We'll get to that here in a minute. So they sat there and said, well, look, we screwed up big time. We're prepared to pay your legal costs. Then I said more things that shouldn't be repeated, that amounted to hell no, no way. Finally, though, after some days of reflection, I relented for a good reason. I had a contract with them, and I had a non-compete, which means I couldn't go back on the air, and I wanted to get back on the air. That's what I do all this for, is to have fun, to be on the air. And so with a non-compete, well, if I didn't go back to them, I didn't go back. So I finally came up with my price. My price was that they drop 4 minutes of commercial time every single hour. They met my price. So I went back because it was the only thing I could do. I wanted that. I wanted my show. So there you have it. Oh, and by the way, that decision, if anybody ever says to you, name your price, do it. That's what I would say, because in retrospect, my price, though it was good for the show, genuinely good for the show. They put those commercials back when I was gone. When I left, they put the commercials back plus. So I should have named my price, and it should have been a high one. But there you have it. The story of my big retirement, and I think Premier's monumental lack of support. So, I needed to get all of that off my chest and out of my gut. That's it. There's lots of good reasons, though, that I am back. I love radio. I mean, I really love it. I've been in radio all my life. Began with ham radio, went to rock and roll radio, spent a lot of years there. Talk radio, you name it radio. That's all I've ever done, so that's all I know, and that's why I'm here. Now, I've got a very wonderful wife right now, by the way, not 13 years of age, as the internet seems to suggest, but 29, I'll be 30 March 1st, who's very, very supportive. That's Erin, my wife now of 7 years. We've got a wonderful 6-year-old, proud to be in the first grade, daughter named Asia. So, Erin and Asia now get up early at about 6 in the morning for school every day. Well, I'm a nocturnal being, and I've been one all my life. I can't do that. So here I am with a stable, happy family. I get a message on Facebook. I mean, Jeremy Coleman. And that was pretty cool because he had to pay $5 because I've got 5,000 members on Facebook. So he had to pay $5. And I called him and he said, why don't you come to, and I've had terrestrial offers all over the place. A couple of really big ones, turned them down. But here is Jeremy saying, come to Sirius XM and just have fun. Like 3 hours, 4 days a week. And just do what you want. Have fun. That was it. I'm like an old radio pirate. That was too much for me. So I rounded up some old buddies. Keith Rowland did artbell.com way back when. Keith Rowland's doing artbell.com now. In fact, if you don't believe it, go over there and take a look. artbell.com. You've got a good reason to go over there because we've got something called the wormhole. No, not Fast Blast. That was yesterday. Today, with a name like Dark Matter, the way you can send a message to me is pretty cool. You can do it by going to artbell.com, look for the wormhole, and then if you have a question for me, a comment for me, or my guest, the wormhole will digest it in Arizona. It will come whizzing all the way over here to Nevada and appear magically on my screen. And you don't have to be any special kind of anything to use the wormhole. You can all use it. So how many of you guessed what my bumper music theme would be? Everybody was trying. Ride My Seesaw was such an obvious choice. Want to take a ride, right? And a ride is what it's going to be. This is going to be an awful lot of fun. Anyway, here I am on Sirius XM. There's no rules, folks. Oh, well, there's one. No bad language. Now, I know to the Sirius XM crowd, that may seem, like anti-Fourth Amendment or something, I don't know. But we don't need bad language here to do what we do. And besides, we serve up an audience that's somewhere between, 12 and 80, maybe more. So there's no point in antagonizing them with bad language, and there's no need, because you can convey information, surprise, shock, whatever, without resorting to bad language. We never did, and I wouldn't want it now. So no bad language. Restrain thyself. Now, I did, and oh, by the way, when we do open lines, they are going to be unscreened open lines, right? Unscreened. That means you just let it ring, and I'll pick it up. Now, don't call right now because I'm not ready for calls. But when we do open lines, they're going to be unscreened. We have a guest? Yes, we'll screen just to the degree that we'll make sure you have a relevant question for the guest. But otherwise, we'll not screen. Let's see, anything. Oh, politics. I said we wouldn't talk about politics, but, it'll sneak in a little bit. There's no way to avoid it. If you talk about global warming or cooling is the latest news, it's going to get a little political. I mean, some topics just, you can't avoid it. That's all there is to it. So there'll be a little bit of that, but I have interests that lie in other areas. Science, the paranormal, our very existence, stuff like that. So, we're about to get underway. I think it seems to me there's something else I wanted to tell you, and it's skipping my mind right now. So that's kind of it. A little bit of politics only when it relates. Oh, I know what it was. Last night, I was sitting in this studio listening to whoever was on around like midnight or 1 a.m., and it was hilarious. Because it was one talk host talking to another. And he was saying, are you going to listen tomorrow night? This guy talks about aliens. Are you going to listen to that? Of course, we talk about much more than aliens, but they come up. And they were joking about it and having a good old time at my expense. And so I sat and listened. It kind of piqued my interest, so I sat and listened a little bit. And I guess I listened for an hour because they started taking calls. They tried to go off to some other topic, but they began taking calls on whatever show this was, and every single call was about aliens. Totally cracked me up. I mean, here they were having a few jokes at my expense. Hey, he's coming on tomorrow night. He's going to talk about aliens. Why don't they just float down? I heard. And then they began going to the phones, and every single call was about aliens. And I think I may have heard a crack toward the end of it. Well, maybe we ought to be talking about aliens. Short break, and we'll be right back.
Of course, we will go. There we go. Musical bumpers, of course, is a no-no because YouTube, even if it's only like 10 seconds, will try to flag it.
All right, a little note about those phone numbers. All right, we're not ready to take calls. Do not call now. Do not call now. And the reason is, if you do, it'll only ring 20 times, and then we'll hang up on you. And that will probably frustrate you and make you angry. So that's it. I'm watching the lines. Hang up and wait. We're going to interview Dr. Kaku, and then at some point, if he so desires, we will take calls. And then if he's only here for, 2.5 hours, then we'll take an hour of open lines on the screen. All right, let's do it. Dr. Michio Kaku is an internationally recognized authority in theoretical physics and the environment. He holds the Henry Summit Professorship in Theoretical Physics at the City College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Quite a sentence. He has lectured around the world And his PhD level textbooks are actually required reading at many of the top physics labs. Dr. Kaku graduated from Harvard in 1968, summa cum laude, number one in his physics class. No surprise, huh? Received his PhD from the University of California at Berkeley Radiation Lab in 1972. There's a place for you. Bet there are stories. He held a lectureship at Princeton University in 1973, joined the faculty at the City University of New York, where he has been a professor of theoretical physics now for 25 years. His goal is to help complete Einstein's dream of a theory of everything, a single equation, he likes to say no bigger perhaps than your thumb, which would unify all the fundamental forces in the universe. Dr. Kaku, welcome.
Welcome. Well, I'm glad to be on your show, Art. It's been a while, huh?
It's great to hear that voice. It's been a very long while, yes, sir. And it's been so many years, Professor, that do you remember I said you're going to be the next Carl Sagan?
Well, I remember, yes. I remember you said that.
Yeah,
and
well,
it wasn't so long ago.
well, you are. You've achieved that. I can't turn on Discovery or any other science program and not see you.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a talent being able to explain the inexplicable, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there's so much to explain. Mm-hmm.
There really is. And I've got one off the top that I've been thinking about and I want to ask you about, all right?
Okay, fire away.
All right, let's start with the hard stuff. Where is it? All right, here we go. In quantum theory, certain physical systems can become entangled, meaning their states are directly related to the state of another object somewhere else. When one object is measured and the Schrodinger wave function collapses into a single state, that's complicated, the other object collapses into its corresponding state no matter how far away the objects are, in other words, non-locality. Is that a fair description?
That's right. Einstein hated this concept, but hey, he was wrong on this one.
Oh, he was wrong?
Yeah, we measure this effect in the laboratory all the time, that interactions are in fact non-local. Einstein thought that the universe was local. That is, all effects are transmitted to nearby objects, not objects over a distance instantaneously. But hey, what can I say? We do this in the laboratory every day.
Okay. But nobody understands. What it comes down to is this, really, folks. If you think of two particles and you get them together and they're flipping and flopping, well, once they've come together, their flips and flops are going to be exactly the same. It doesn't matter if one's in New York and one's in Moscow. Is that correct, Doctor?
That's right. If you take two electrons and bring them together so they vibrate in unison, and then you separate them, an invisible umbilical cord connects them no matter how far they are separated. You can separate them to the ends of the galaxy, and you vibrate one, and in some sense the other one is aware of the fact that it's attached to an object on the other side of the galaxy. Amazing.
Well, more than amazing. I think Einstein said spooky something at a distance.
Yeah, spooky action at a distance, said Einstein.
Okay, but it's not possible. I mean, without communication of A and B, how would they know to flip it and flop at exactly the same point? They're doing a dance together, but they're not communicating.
Well, in some sense, they are. Electrons spin up and down. So if you know that one electron is spin up, then its partner is going to be spin down. But if you separate them and you measure the spin of one electron and it's down, then instantly, faster than the speed of light, you now know that an object on the other side of the galaxy is spin up, which is amazing. It's astounding.
It's amazing and astounding, but Professor, I'm a ham radio operator, and I can transmit 1,500 watts through a very effective antenna from here to Moscow, let's say, and I'm going sublight, not light speed, but sublight, a little bit. And So there is communication, but it takes me a big transmitter, a giant antenna, and I may or may not be heard in Moscow. My point is, how are these things, how are they talking?
Well, we don't know. We just know that spin is conserved, so that if one electron is spin up, the other one is spin down, so the total sum is zero. But if you separate them, the memory of them being attached stays with them, even though you separate them over light years. And if you measure one being spin up, the other one is automatically spin down, and you now know that faster than the speed of light. Now, Einstein, of course, hated that idea, going faster than the speed of light, but we do this in the laboratory. Now, there is a catch, however. Einstein, in some sense, has the last laugh. It turns out that the information you send across this process is random information. That is, you cannot send Morse code this way. But in some sense, everything is entangled. Every atom of your body, in some sense, is entangled with another atom on the other side of the galaxy, which is amazing if you think about it.
It is, but the bottom line is still we don't fully understand it at all, right?
Right. However, quantum teleportation, a la Star Trek, is a direct consequence of this effect. And this has now been demonstrated at the University of Austria, also Caltech, University of Maryland, many places. And quantum teleportation, a la Star Trek, that is teleporting Captain Kirk from one place to another, may eventually be possible. We already teleport atoms now. Individual atoms can also be connected using this method of entanglement, so that the atom here can exchange information to another atom on the other side of the galaxy.
So we can teleport atoms, yes?
Yes, we teleported photons. The world's record is, I think, 600 meters for teleporting photons. And we now can teleport atoms, cesium atoms, rubidium atoms. This is now something that we do in the laboratory.
Okay, well, let me just wait until they've really got it down before I volunteer for an entire body move. Here's what I wanted to ask you, the build up to all this. Here's where it is, and this is going to take you out of your comfort zone a little bit. But boy, I was sitting here thinking about all of this, the quantum story you just told, and then I thought about twins. You know, people who are twins. You know, I've been off on this for years now, this consciousness kick.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Professor, consciousness may have a quantum link. I know that's a terrible jump for you, but I have this feeling, and my example would be twins. Sometimes you've got a twin on one side of the world feeling pain when the other side of the twin on the other side of the world has something awful happen to it. And I've just got this funny feeling there's a quantum connection. What say you?
Well, some of the greatest minds of quantum mechanics, like Eugene Wigner, winner of the Nobel Prize, he helped to build the atomic bomb. He believed that the quantum theory proved that there has to be a cosmic consciousness. And the reason for that is as follows. When you do this measurement, you don't know whether an object is spin up or spin down till you look at it.
Right.
So the observation process, in some sense, determines its state. And this means that since observation requires consciousness, only conscious beings can make measurements, we think, right? This means that consciousness is required to make an observation. And this goes back to what is called the Schrödinger cat problem,
yes.
Where if I put a cat in a box and I attach a gun to the cat so the gun can kill the cat, is the cat dead or alive? Well, before you open the box, we physicists have to add the wave function of a dead cat to the wave function of a live cat. The cat is neither dead nor alive. When you open the box, then you say, aha, the cat is alive. So this means that observation, that is opening the box, in some sense determined that the cat was alive.
I follow everything up to the point where you said it determined.
Right. In other words, we don't know whether the cat is dead or alive until you open the box and make an observation. Before that, It's in Never Never Land. It's in a mixture of two states.
Right, but how did your observation determine which it was?
Well, the state can either be alive or dead before you open the box.
Right.
When you open the box, the so-called wave function collapses. So it then degenerates into a live cat or a dead cat. Before it has a choice. Once you open the box, it's either dead or alive. So the observation process determined the fact that it exists in a certain state. So even though this sounds bizarre, this is the way electrons work, and that's why we have laser beams. Laser beams are a direct consequence of this. Why are laser beams so bizarre and so strange? It's precisely because the laser beam is a quantum effect.
All right, but I hate this, but I still don't get how my opening the box and observing that the cat was alive helped the cat be alive. It's a 50-50 prop. It could have been dead too, right? And I observed that. That's
right. It could have been dead as well. But the fact that when you open the box, you now know the state of the cat, okay? That means that observation collapsed the wave. So the wave is no longer oscillating between being dead and alive. The wave has to choose. The wave has to choose whether the cat is dead or alive.
Well, that would be the wave choosing, not me.
Yeah, we don't choose ahead of time the fact that the cat is alive. We don't choose. It's the observation process that chooses it. So by opening the box, you now know the cat is, let's say, alive. We can't choose that it's alive. It's a 50-50, either alive or dead.
Okay, now I get it.
Right. And this works for electrons, and it works for transistors, and that's why your laptop works. Why is it that transistors and laptops are so miraculous and do so many crazy things? It's precisely because of this effect. If quantum mechanics were turned off, lasers would no longer work. The satellites we have in outer space wouldn't work. The internet would collapse. All modern electronics would grind to a halt if the quantum mechanical interpretation is turned off. So we live the quantum theory every single second you're online.
Well, okay. All right, let's change gears. I'm sorry, I just had to ask about that. And there's one other thing. Yeah. Remember, we've got a big new audience here. We're on Sirius XM. So if you would run through the various types of civilizations that I know you measure, it's a way of measuring, I guess. Again, we are, before we even begin, we remain, I take it, a type 0.
That's right. We physicists like to measure everything in terms of energy. That's how we quantify things, including civilizations in outer space. So if you look at outer space, there must be 3 types of civilizations, type 1, type 2, type 3, depending upon energy output. Eventually, a civilization becomes planetary. They control the oceans. They mine they can mine the earth. They can mine the ocean. They control the weather. So they control all planetary energy like volcanoes and earthquakes. That's type 1. Type 2 is they've exhausted the power of a planet, and they start to mobilize the power of a star. They play with stars like Star Trek. The Federation of Planets would be a very typical type 2 civilization where they've colonized just a few star systems. Then eventually you exhaust the power of a star and you go to the galaxy. That's type 3, where you roam the galactic space lanes like the Empire of Empire Strikes Back. So we have planets, stars, and galaxies. But recently I was speaking in London, and a little kid comes up to me and he says, "Professor, you're wrong. There's got to be type 4. And I said, "Well, you're crazy. There's no such thing as type 4. There are only planets, stars, and galaxies." And he said, "No, there's type 4, the power of the continuum." And then I realized, yeah, there is something beyond galactic power, and that's dark energy. And that's the continuum. That's the power of the cube. And I realized, oh my God, there really is an extragalactic source of energy out there. Dark energy, which actually makes up about 73% of the universe's energy. So
and dark matter?
Yeah, well, dark matter's in there. And now on this scale, what are we on this scale? We are type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal, right?
But we do deserve to call ourselves a civilization, yes?
Yes, we are type 0, and we're about 100 years from being type 1. If you just get a calculator and calculate the energy output of the Earth, we're about a type 0 in about 100 years will be type 1. So we are now making the historic transition to type 1. So what is the Internet? The Internet is a type 1 telephone system. we're privileged to be alive to see the birth of a beginning of a type 1 technology called the Internet. The language that these people will speak, well, today, the two dominant languages of the Internet are English and Mandarin. So we are already beginning to see a type 1 language. Soccer and the Olympics is beginning of a type 1 sports. The European Union, NAFTA, we see the beginning of a type 1 economy.
Quick question. Do you think that in 100 years, English will still be part of a type 1 civilization?
Probably be the dominant language. Everywhere I go around the world, people speak English to each other. I could go to Vietnam and see Chinese, Vietnamese, and Laotian physicists, and they all speak English to each other because there's no common language in Asia other than English. And the same thing in Europe. You can go to a conference in Europe among scientists, and they all speak English. Business, finance, arts, everyone speaks English.
Okay, that's comforting. We'll be here, or at least our language. So.
That's right. And the question is whether or not we're going to be here. That's the big question, right?
Actually, in the old days when I interviewed you about this, I asked you about the odds of either A, being destroyed as a type 0, or B, making it to type 1 and, popping the corks on champagne. But I don't know. I've got this feeling that you probably haven't changed your mind. What are the odds that we make it successfully to type 1 without destroying ourselves?
Well, this is the most historic transition in the history of our civilization, the transition from type 0 to type 1. And it's not guaranteed that we're going to make it because we have global warming, nuclear proliferation, the spread of biogerms. We have threats we create ourselves. And so it's not clear. However, I'd say 50-50 now. I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was when I first talked to you.
I should say. That's a big change.
Yeah,
that makes me feel better. I feel a lot better now.
Yeah, and I think 50-50 that, we have a fighting chance that we'll make it to type 1.
Okay, look, it wasn't that long ago that we spoke. Now, between then and now, what's encouraged you?
Well, the economy collapsed.
It did.
And we hit rock bottom. But hey, we're still here, right?
Appear to be.
Yeah. And, we were in denial about so many of these problems back then. But now, they dominate the headlines, global warming and, nuclear proliferation, stuff like that. People are beginning to get aware of some of these things. And so I think that that's going to be good. And, democracy is spreading because of the Internet. Look at Arab Spring and look at the spread of democracy because of the Internet. And democracies do not war with other democracies. Think of every war that you've learned since you were in grade school. And they've always been between kings, queens, emperors, and dictators, but never between two democracies. And so as the Internet spreads democracies don't war with other democracies. And so I think we will have wars in the future, but they're going to be less wars, less ferocious, and less common as the spread of democracy takes hold. The big loser in all this, I think, are dictatorships. Dictatorships thrive on the ignorance of their own people. And I think, to be a dictator is to be an endangered species.
I would have to agree. I mean, recent history certainly proves that, right? So,
yes. That's what the glimmer of hope. I'm not quite as pessimistic as I was before. I see the spread of democracy. People are becoming more aware of these problems, and democracies debate these problems, and they confront them, and they don't war with each other.
That's optimism, all right. By the way, what about the little trips that we've had along the way? I mean, big earthquakes, nuclear reactors going bonkers.
Yeah, well, it's not clear that we are going to make it. I mean, look at Fukushima, right? That's a disaster that no one predicted. 3 simultaneous meltdowns. You realize that the core at the Fukushima liquefied? We've never seen liquefaction of a nuclear reactor core before.
Actually, I think it was 3 of them, right?
3 of them, right. 3 liquefations of molten uranium. And you realize that we still have not controlled it. They could spiral out of control any day. A small little earthquake, and the reactor accident starts up all over again.
Professor, hold tight right there. I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dark Matter.
Again, once the musical bumper's done, we'll be back.
Back. It's great to be back. My guest is Professor Michio Kaku. I think our nation's premier physics explainer. Also, the co-discoverer of string theory, just so you know the amount of weight you're in the presence of. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Dark Matter in progress. I'm Mark Bell. I want to note the passing of a friend, Wayne Green. He's a ham radio guy, the originator of 73 magazine, so much more in electronics, passed, I think, on the 14th. Take care, buddy. See you eventually. Dark Matter, the premier broadcast underway right now. My guest, Dr. Michio Kaku, and we're back, Professor. Before Fukushima, what are the possibilities, both, good and bad?
Well, nuclear energy had so much promise decades ago. Many futurists predicted that by the year 2000, we would have 1,000 reactors and 1,000 breeder reactors in the United States. Right. Now we're lucky to just have 100 ordinary reactors, and we have 0 breeder reactors. So there's been a collapse of nuclear energy in the United States. However, in Japan, we have something even worse. Right now, we have this raging meltdown that's in a temporary stasis. Right now, every single nuclear power plant in Japan is shut down. Every single one. 0 energy output from nuclear energy right now.
Wow.
So it's causing a national crisis. That's the 3rd largest economy on the planet. And all of a sudden, one of their main sources of energy is shut off. So it's caused a tremendous amount of disruption. And the cleanup will take about 40 years. 40 years. Chernobyl, by the way, back in 1986, it's still going on. You realize the core is still melting its way through the earth outside Kiev. And that's been, 25 years in the making. So it'll take about 40 years to clean up the Fukushima disaster.
All right. On behalf of my wife and others, I want to ask this. When Fukushima happened, I was in the Philippines. We were worried to death, the radiation's going to come this way. Of course, it went toward the U.S. instead, because that's where the prevailing winds, I guess, take it. Now, here's my question. They're pouring all of this water on the reactors to keep them from further, I guess, meltdown. And this water is running off. They're trying to capture it as best they can. But they're not doing a really good job. A lot of it's leaking into the Pacific Ocean.
That's right. TEPCO, the utility, has now admitted that they bungled the cleanup operation. 300 tons worth of radioactive water, we think, have spilled into the outside environment and probably into the Pacific Ocean. The Korean government is now threatening not to purchase any more fish from Japan because of this crisis. This is going to escalate as a consequence of this. And TEPCO, unfortunately, is sort of like, the Three Stooges operating a nuclear power plant. Moe, Larry, and Curly chasing each other around the control room, hitting each other over the head. We have a bunch of incompetents running that nuclear power plant. I think that eventually the government's going to have to take over and do what Gorbachev did back in 1986, and that is call out the military. It was a military operation that finally got the Chernobyl under control. And I think the Japanese government may have to do something similar, admit that utility is totally outclassed, outgunned, and they should perhaps bring in the military.
Wow. Self-defense forces or U.S. military?
Self-defense forces. You realize
Can
that
they
in
handle
Chernobyl, 250,000 people were involved in that cleanup operation. 250,000 people. It was the largest engineering feat of its type ever attempted.
And a lot of them died. A lot of them died, too, right?
The initial, the firemen and the initial emergency crews, they died a horrible, horrible death. Skin falling off, hair falling off, They had a lethal dose of radiation in the initial day of the Chernobyl accident. Yeah.
So is that what they're facing in Japan? I mean, are there some jobs that are so damn dangerous that if they start the real cleanup and send in the military, there's going to be people that will not live through the experience?
Yeah, well, at Chernobyl, many people were sent in just for a few minutes, to do these very important tasks. Robots, for example, cannot do these tasks. No matter how many science fiction movies we've seen with robots in them, robots can barely turn a screwdriver. And so robots have been a total failure at Fukushima. And as a consequence, the Pentagon, the U.S. Pentagon, has now set up a crash program to develop robots that can actually turn screws and turn valves. And
robots have been a giant failure worldwide anyway. I mean, when I was a kid, we all thought, oh, man, robots will be doing the dishes and cleaning the rugs and everything else by the time we're grown up.
Yeah, no, robots have the intelligence of an insect, like a cockroach, a retarded, lobotomized cockroach. They're very slow, the robots we have at MIT. Okay, and you put them inside Chernobyl, and all they do is get lost.
Can I just stop you for 1 second and ask why? Why have we not made more strides in robotics?
We made a mistake 50 years ago. We thought that the brain is a computer, but you see, the brain is not a digital computer. There's no Windows. There's no Pentium chip. There's no software. There's no programming. There's no subroutines. The brain is not a digital computer. It's a learning machine. It's called a neural network. It learns, and it changes itself after it learns, right? Now, your laptop today is just as stupid as it was yesterday, because laptops never change. They never learn anything. And that's the difference between a digital computer robot and a human brain. The brain does one thing, learn, okay? It doesn't compute. It doesn't add. Doesn't subtract like what ordinary robots do.
My Windows 7 does not learn.
Right. And, robots are adding machines, very sophisticated. So it gives you the appearance that it's thinking, but it's actually not thinking at all. It's just adding. Right. While we are learning machines. And that's why at Fukushima, we have robots that can't even turn a screwdriver. It's that bad.
So they're no good. So are people going to lose their lives trying to get Fukushima under control eventually? Is that what it comes to?
I hope it doesn't happen that way. But, if they do what the Russians did, they'll order, hundreds of thousands of people to go in just for a few minutes apiece and turn the screws and open the valves and begin the cleanup operation. You realize they keep dumping cold water on the reactor and it flows out because the loop is not closed. It's an open loop. And until they close the loop, they're going to dump more water and create more radioactive water as a consequence.
All right. What about the fish? What about the sea life? What about the ocean? You're an environmentalist as well as everything else. So how bad is it?
Well, that's what we're fearful of. Cesium, strontium, and iodine occur in water-soluble form. And they will eventually wind up into the food chain. In fact, even in Tokyo, some housewives bring Geiger counters when they go shopping. There are hotspots outside the evacuation zone of Fukushima, because it rains and the radiation was distributed unevenly. There are hotspots. And as you get closer to Fukushima, there are dead zones, areas that, just like at Chernobyl, will be off limits for centuries to come. And it does mean that we have to inspect the fish because strontium, iodine, cesium will accumulate in muscle tissue and different kinds of organs of the fish. So it is something that has to be monitored. So far, so good. So far, there has been no major dumping of radioactive waste. But, hey, it could happen. It's seeping slowly. But so far, we have not yet seen a catastrophic breach of the water.
Okay. Professor, if you were a one-man committee in charge of deciding what the world needs to do with nuclear power and nuclear power plants and where we go as a world from here for energy, what would your advice to the world be with respect to nuclear power?
Well, I think every country has to decide for itself, but the Germans have decided, and they've thrown in the towel. Nuclear power is going to be phased out in Germany. Also, Switzerland. They both have phased out nuclear energy. Italy is teetering. Japan, every poll shows that the people do not want nuclear. But of course, something has to replace it, right?
Yes.
And right now, there's no single white knight. We would like to go with solar and renewable technology and clean technology, but solar is more expensive, and we're going to have to reduce the cost of solar. Now, further down the line, I think maybe within 5 to 10 years, in that framework, solar power gets cheaper and cheaper and slowly becomes more competitive with oil and coal. But on a 10-year time frame, fusion becomes possible. The French are bidding to store on the ITER fusion reactor that will hopefully go online in 10 years or so.
It'll be safe?
Well, we don't know because we've never had an operating fusion reactor before. But fusion reactors do not melt down. Meltdowns are caused by nuclear waste. The heat emitted from nuclear waste causes meltdowns. While fusion reactors...
Let me try this out. Yes, if a fusion reactor goes wrong, what do we have?
Well, nothing, because it shuts itself off.
Good.
A fusion reactor has to attain what is called Lawson's criterion. Lawson's criterion, you have to have the right density, the right temperature to get fusion off the ground. The sun does it. Hydrogen bombs do it. And a fusion plant also has to attain Lawson's criterion. But if you have a leak, then the Lawson's criterion is no longer satisfied, and it shuts off. So the fusion plant basically shuts off. It doesn't melt like a conventional nuclear fission plant because it has no nuclear waste.
Dare I ask, so nothing can go wrong?
Well, there's always something that can go wrong, but not on the scale of fission. You know, fission reactors that use uranium are not found in nature. Mother Nature does not use uranium at all. Uranium is only found on the planet Earth for fission reactors. Mother Nature uses fusion, which is clean, recyclable. That's what Mother Nature uses, fusion.
Well, with Russia in mind, and before Fukushima, I was kind of a proponent of nuclear energy, and I think, if you'll excuse the expression, it was beginning to gather steam again until Fukushima. But right now, I think most people are probably going to say no thank you, which means we better get moving on something else, eh?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should start to look at other forms of energy. I think for the next 10 years, there's going to be a flux. No one single white knight is going to emerge in the next 10 years. Right now, fossil fuels are as cheap as they've been because of shale and fracking. So that's given some industrial nations breathing space. But I think that eventually, in a 10-year time frame, renewables, solar, hydrogen will become competitive with fossil fuels. And again, 10 years from now, fusion starts to be in the mix. And so I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see chaos. The atmosphere is going to get worse with global warming. We're going to dump more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But in a 10-plus year time frame, there's some good news in the sense that renewable technology becomes cheaper and fusion becomes a possibility in that time frame.
Is fracking safe?
Well, so far so good. So far we hadn't had a major disaster with regards to fracking, which requires, of course, fracturing some of the strata deep underneath the ground. However, maybe the worst case scenario will be fulfilled at some point. When oil was discovered, no one thought we would have gigantic super tankers that would spring a leak and pollute huge chunks of the coastline, right?
Right.
So we definitely could have another disaster with fracking, but so far so good.
Okay. We haven't even talked about the stuff you came on the air to talk about yet. So let's do that.
Well, I love to talk about anything with you.
I do too. Exoplanets, my goodness, in just the short years that we have not talked, they have discovered so many planets that are kind of like Earth, huh?
Yeah.
It's amazing how many of them.
That's right.
Well,
2 a week, right?
2 a week.
Yeah.
And that means somewhat Earth-like, yes?
Yeah, that's right. Last time we talked, we were just hoping that we would be able to identify planets way out there orbiting other stars. Now we've identified 2,000 planets, and now we can take a census of the Milky Way galaxy. This is a first. We've never been able to do this before. We now realize that over 50% of all stars at night you see in the Milky Way have planets of some sort. Over 50% of all stars have planets. And of them, we think that maybe 1 out of every 200 has an Earth-like planet. That means in our own backyard, the Milky Way galaxy, with about 200 billion stars, we have about 1 billion Earth-like planets in our own backyard. This is astounding. You know?
It is astounding, and it begs the question, where the hell are they?
Yeah, well, that's the Fermi paradox. I have my own point of view, and that is if they can visit us from these fantastic distances, right, hundreds and hundreds of light years, they're probably type 2, or more likely type 3. And, our galaxy could be teeming with information being exchanged by different type 3 civilizations, right? There could be a galactic empire. We could be in the middle of it. But
we're ants. We're nothing but ants. They haven't even noticed we're here yet.
That's right. We could be in the middle. We could be in the middle of this intergalactic communication network, and we're so primitive that we don't even know it. So sad.
Yeah, they passed this little green-blue orb and just kept on going. Nothing there. Nothing of significance anymore.
Yeah, I mean, what makes us think that we are so arrogant that they're going to want to land on the White House lawn? Give me a break.
There is one other somewhat negative possibility, though, and that is that nobody ever gets to be a type 1.
Yeah, the other flip side of this is that perhaps type 0 civilizations are common, like us, but they never make it to type 1. Right. They self-destruct. So when we have starships and visit these planets one day, we may see atmospheres that are radioactive, atmospheres that are super hot, atmospheres with germs in them, because they had warfare and they polluted their planet. And perhaps that's a warning that we are now on the verge of becoming type 1. We're making the historic transition, the first time in civilization, from one type to another type, and we may not make it.
At best you're giving us 50-50 to make it to type 1 now. And that's pretty good compared to what you were giving. Like 1 in 100.
Right.
1 in 100. So we certainly made progress, but I don't know. I mean, on a good day, I'm with you. 50-50 on a bad day, no way.
Yeah, but, look at the spread of democracy. I mean, when I open the newspaper, I can't believe what's happening. People taking to the streets. I mean, people taking control over their own future. I mean, this was unheard of during the Cold War. During the Cold War, the world was frozen solid during the Cold War, right?
It's true. We're a solid notch above that.
Yeah, and so people are now taking their own destiny in their own hands. And so I think that's a real positive statement. And, like I said, once governments become democratic, people worry about sewer systems and taxations and how to educate their kids. They don't want to glorify the king. They don't want to sacrifice their kids to for some unnamed war in some unnamed continent, right? They want a good life.
Right, but I still would like to meet more 0.8 type people.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in. Okay. So anyway, I guess there's a lot of planets out there, and we're looking harder and harder. What's the deal with Kepler?
Well, unfortunately, Kepler is a satellite that discovered thousands of these planets, and it's crippled right now. So unfortunately, it's not stable. It cannot lock on to planets and make the delicate measurements that it used to. However, there's enough data for us to analyze them. And Kepler only looked at a fragment of the Milky Way galaxy and found thousands of planets, and about 1% or so of them are Earth-like. And so we may find a twin of the Earth in outer space, perhaps this year or next year, at the rate at which we're going. This year or next year, somebody's going to announce that we have found a twin of the Earth, same size, same characteristics, perhaps with liquid oceans. And that could be a game changer. Think about that, a twin of the Earth.
It could, but but again, where are they? I mean, I want radio or TV or some, for example, will we ever have a instrument, even in space, delicate enough to detect any sign at all of civilization, even if they're not trying to communicate?
Well, it's not clear. I mean, it seems to me that a civilization that advanced, they use lasers to communicate with each other rather than radio. And our satellites and our detection system are not equipped to look for extraterrestrial laser communications.
I've heard that they're beginning to think about looking for laser bursts from another civilization somewhere. Is that a likely prospect?
That's also possible because, the way in which we send information may not be the way they send information.
Right.
If your message is going to be scrambled across supernovas and gas clouds, you want redundancies and you want to spread your signal around a bit and you want to pulse it. And so, these messages being sent by extraterrestrials could be on a totally different kind of frequency. They could be spread over several different frequencies. They could be pulsed. There are many ways that they can increase the efficiency of transmission through gas clouds and supernovae. But we are looking for hydrogen frequency messages,
right,
which is stupid if you think about it. Why should aliens communicate with radio on a hydrogen frequency? But that's what we do.
If you had one opportunity, Professor, to communicate something to life that might be out there, what would you tell them about the human race?
Well, first of all, I would not do what other scientists have done, and that is to advertise our existence and to give our exact coordinates in outer space with regards to the nearby stars. Yeah. We don't know their intentions. I think their intentions are going to be good because, of course, if they're that advanced, there's plenty of uninhabited planets to plunder for natural resources. They don't have to bother with us. So I think they're going to be peaceful. However, on the small chance that they're not peaceful, I don't think we should advertise our existence because they may pick up a medallion and say to themselves, lunch, let's go have lunch.
Yes, I remember that. I think it was the Twilight Zone. All right, hold it right there, Professor, and we'll be right back. We're going to take one of our 2 hourly breaks. I guess I can do a third if I want to, but I don't have to. So we'll break here. We'll be right back with Professor Michio Kaku on dark matter. I'm Art Bell.
And that's where we will take the break as well. We will return to them tomorrow night at this time to pick up with Art Bell and the Doctor. So in the meantime, we'll wrap this evening up. As always, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us to those goals of 5,000 viewers and 1,000 subscribers so both Boxy over at Nexters and Google and YouTube will pay attention to us. You know, the stuff. Ibotta and CoinBase are below. Fill them out. You get $10 each free. CoinBase will let you do your Coinbase Learn less than 2-minute lessons, 1-question quizzes to get yourself $100 in free crypto. And Ibotta basically rewards you for what you have to do in your daily life. So until we do meet tomorrow, be kind to one another. May your fights in Dominion always be on your winning side. And we'll see you tomorrow as we continue to march on here from day one. Have a great night. Enjoy your night's rest. And as always, like, share, and subscribe.